Okay, so this is called A New Volunteering Landscape. So we're going to be talking about creating new roles and adapting current roles. So as you can imagine, this training was created out of, what happened last year and how things have changed. And we all have to adapt and become a little bit more creative. So we're just going to try and help you with that process and get you the creative juices flowing and see how we can all move forward now that everything is opening up again. So it's myself and Riona giving the training this evening, and we're both volunteer development officers in the volunteer centre. And we've probably dealt with you at some point over the last couple of years, or maybe you're relatively new to us. But we're there a good while and we know our stuff. So feel free to give us a call about anything that you're concerned about, or anything that you'd like to run past us, or in the line of volunteer roles and governance and different things like that. So that's our website there, volunteersligo.ie. If you're looking for roles, or if you're looking to put up roles because you're volunteer involving organizations, you'll be using the iVol website to put your roles up there. You can't actually edit anything or amend anything on that website, but you can put your role up. And if you want to change anything, then you can come to us and we'll edit it on our end for you. And there are email addresses there. So like I say, get in touch anytime. So before we start, the usual requests. So turn off distractions or close other applications. We have the little chat box, so do your questions anytime, but we'll have time at the end as well, so don't worry. Or just shoot them in at any stage and we'll get to them. And when you're not speaking, just please mute your microphone. And then by all means, if you want to just, pop in or put up your hand or whatever it is, and we'll see you. So if you're kind of new to the scene, what we do in Sligo Volunteer Centre is we provide a link between people interested in volunteering and non-profit groups looking for volunteers. We advertise for volunteers on behalf of 300 plus non-profit groups in Sligo and County Sligo, and we refer interested people to these groups like yours. Potential volunteers register on our website, or they phone up, or when we can, we'll meet them in person at volunteer information sessions, and then we provide info on options to help them to decide what they want to do if they're unsure. So a lot of the time, it can be a bit overwhelming and they're not, aware of the vast amount of options that we usually have. There's so many different things they can do, and they're always surprised then with the range of ideas. So we just kind of figure out between us, what they're suited to or what they'd like and their skills and that kind of thing, and match them up to a role with you guys. So yeah, the public views your volunteer role on our website. So that's the iVol one. We put them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So we're constantly generating interest in. We put them in the community notes in the newspaper as well every 2 weeks. And volunteers self-select based on your ad. So, we'll come to it, that you put in the right information into your ad for your role, just to be clear on what it is and time and commitment and all of that. And important note here, we don't screen anybody. Sometimes organizations think that we have put through people, or we have put the people in contact with you guys and that they're all vetted and screened, or we don't do any of that. We're literally just linking you up. And we hold online information workshops at the moment. We used to do them in person, so we'd have up to about 6 people into the office and do a little old-fashioned presentation on a flip chart with the marker, and then take people one-on-one after and have a chat with them about what they like. So we've moved that online and it's working out pretty well. Sometimes you get a full house kind of a thing. Obviously we can accommodate more people than 6 now, and then sometimes people don't come at all, and that could be for any reason, but we hold them anyway. So we're there for people if they wish to do that. Otherwise, if they don't catch us at the workshop, we'll chat to them on the phone or email to help people who are still unsure about what they want to do. And what we do for organisations like yourselves, so we help with developing new volunteer roles. Sometimes, you might have roles that you don't even know that you have, that you could get somebody for. But then we have the experience, and we have the history of all the roles that have been with the volunteer centre. So we'll know, if it's possible to get somebody for a particular role or something that you haven't thought about, we might pick up on that, and we can develop that with you. And what we do is maintain a database of volunteer roles on iVol connected to all volunteer centres nationwide. So there's a whole host of national roles as well that people can view on iVol. So they can whittle it down to 5 kilometres, 10, 20, but they can also go nationwide, and they'll see roles that are around the country. And that's particularly useful if they're virtual roles or online roles, or something like that, this sort of quirky roles or something like that. So what we do for you is advertise your volunteer roles and promote them widely, like we said, online, in person when we meet people, newspapers, email updates, and targeting for niche roles. And whatever a niche role might be, it doesn't sound niche, but maybe like a driver for an organization, so we would like, there's X amount of people who may have said in their preferences that they would like to drive for, that they'd like to do like Meals on Wheels or something like that, or the Neurology Support Centre have a new role where they're looking for a driver to bring a service user to the beach. And so we would have a certain amount of people who have selected that kind of driving or have it as a skill, and we can target those people for that role. So that's kind of useful. We refer potential volunteers to you. And then, we're always there to support you and advise on every aspect of involving volunteers. And, we host other training during the year as well, which probably, well, maybe not this year, but we'll probably go back to kind of, training that we did over the past couple of years, like finding and keeping volunteers, and maybe, was it conflict kind of resolution, Riona, or what was the other kind of training we offered?
Well, there was, you're thinking of the diversity one that Paula did, yeah.
Yeah. So, but we'll keep you abreast of all of those, any training that's up and coming, and like I say, we're available for guard the vetting and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So we run occasional once-off training and workshops. So one thing we've been running very successfully over the past year is organising networking get-togethers online. Again, we used to do this in person when we could, and it was a lovely way just getting together with them, people who manage volunteers or who, is a team leader for volunteers. So we call them volunteer coordinators, and get them into a room. And, sometimes there's a theme for the meeting, but sometimes, and we've, over the last while, because everything was so up in the air, we didn't really have a theme. So we kind of left it open for people to come in with any sort of issues or fears or worries that they had, and just to network. So it's so nice to meet other people who are doing the same thing as you are. So our next one is on June the 16th, and it's on, you can apply on Eventbrite, or by all means, drop us a line here in the chat if you want us to sign you up. And today, do you know what time it's on, Riona, on the 16th?
I think it's 11 a.m. I think it's
during the day. Yeah. But we can find out for you anyway if you want us to sign you up today. So what we're hoping will come out of this evening's training is to shift your thinking from reaction to action. So it's to get you, ready for what's coming, rather than, something happening like it has, and then, just, how do we deal with that? So we're kind of through that anyway, but we're hoping that you'll know more about the trends in volunteering in Ireland today. We'll explore how to adapt old volunteer roles and create new roles, including how to manage volunteers virtually. and explore the challenges we're facing. So a little bit later, we're going to put you into breakout rooms so you can chat to each other, and we'll give you, the 1 or 2 little topics to chat about. And understanding the basics of good volunteer management and how to apply this now. So it's always important. And I guess it's always something that, in all of our training and in all of our meetings, we just, reiterate good volunteer management, best practice, and we just keep hammering it home till it sets in. Now, sorry. So the new landscape, I was laughing at the backdrop to this picture. It's so miserable looking. But we're coming, it's such a lovely evening. It's not like that outside, so that's good. So it's ever changing. So that means restrictions are lifting, but we're not completely out of it yet. It's tentative, but thankfully we are moving in the right direction. It's uneven. So that means that lots of people were looking to volunteer last year. There was very happily, or, a huge influx of people who wanted to help straight away, which was brilliant. But unfortunately, like, we weren't ready, or people weren't ready, groups weren't ready. We didn't know how to, we didn't even know where to start. So there weren't a lot of opportunities. And now that opportunities are reactivating, or these new roles are coming in, will we have the same amount of people ready to volunteer? And we don't think so, because they'll be so happy to get back to their own lives. And, the summertime is coming, and they might think, woohoo, we're just going to take advantage of this for a few months and then maybe have a look at the volunteering again. But, and some may never return, in fact, for whatever reasons. But so we think, volunteer roles must be as attractive as you can make them, and not very formal, and not highly technical and that kind of thing. Just make them really appealing and attractive. And so unclear. And so that's the future anyway. We can't predict anything, so we don't know when exactly it will end or how it will impact us in the next few months. But what we do know is that there has been a lot of stress and anxiety, and that, of course, will remain, and we have yet to see the repercussions of that as we come out of it. But in terms of volunteering, that stress and anxiety will still be there for a lot of people, so it will linger, and we need to make people comfortable in coming back or engaging in volunteering again. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So there are some unknowns, but there are changes that we can prepare for. So what changes can we prepare for? So there has been a decrease in formal volunteering, and that is linked to the pandemic, of course. But so thousands of people who wanted to volunteer at the start of the pandemic were never given the chance, like I said, because the opportunities didn't exist. So they probably just started volunteering, casually in their own communities, or, doing the shopping themselves. They didn't want to get into the formal side of things. So the paperwork, they probably would have all had to have been vetted. So they just did it, they just did it informally, without registering it with anybody. Basically, they didn't want to go back and get involved in that kind of thing. And obviously then there's an increase then in that informal volunteering. It was already there anyway, but there was definitely more of it, and it's likely to increase. And there's a greater desire for virtual and episodic volunteering. So that there definitely was a lot of interest in online roles, and it actually worked out pretty well. There is a cohort of volunteers who really enjoy online or virtual roles, and maybe they only have time for that, or they only they're more comfortable being at home and doing it on a computer, or knitting something at home or something like that. And then, in terms of the episodic, is something that you can dip in and out of. And we would have had the role, like, you can write letters to Molam Nursing Home. So you could write one letter, and you know what, a couple of weeks later, you might think, I could send a postcard, Valentine's Day might have rolled, or you could send a card, something like that. You can dip in and out. And that has become very attractive. So those roles, actually thinking about it now, coming into the summer and everything, are attractive, you know, something that you don't have to be overly committed to. And as we're, like I said, we're always going to be on about it, the good volunteer management is more important than ever, because you have to kind of step up your, you know, your role of being encouraging and being, you know, attracting people back and looking after people maybe a little bit more, depending on your volunteers' needs, you know, and what your roles are. So that's something you can think about. So what can we do? Well, we can adapt existing roles. So that's roles that you've had with us, or roles that you, even if you haven't registered them with us and you've had them for the last few years, you know, you can adapt them now to the, so that just means, you know, you can go online with them, or you can change them around to suit the current landscape, you know, whatever it is. We'll talk about that as well. Or, you know, you can do more shifts or whatever it is, you know, that the role needs. Or we can create new roles. So I'm sure some of you have, you know, coming out of this, things have changed so much, you know, maybe you have new roles that have come out of this. You know, we certainly, ourselves as a volunteer centre, we have to have a look at our role, you know, constantly now, and see where we fit in. And how can we be creative? And we've had, you know, we've had to do things we haven't had to do before. So that's, it's been new for us as well. You know, we're all adapting. So it has been very interesting at the same time. And it's been good, you know, a bit of a shake up. Not that you would have asked for it ever that way, but is good, you know. So then volunteering from home. So if you've had people over the last year volunteering from home, or if you're intending on moving some of your roles online, you know, we're just want you to remember that there's still, you know, real people, real volunteers, they're still looking for meaningful engagement. They're still looking to, you know, to do something really good, give them real tasks that will help the organization, real needs, that they'll have a real impact, and that they will get real support from you. So that's just, you know, just because it's virtual, don't forget about them. In other words, they're still there. They still want to do something for you. They still, you know, it might have been, it's a big deal for them. So where possible, we would say, you know, meet them in real life regularly if you can. And this will make them feel more valued, more important, and ultimately keep them engaged. Volunteers usually want to build relationships. Of course, the social side of volunteering is huge, and it's what we've been hearing as well, that people can't wait to get back out to meet people again. And they're kind of waiting, you know, there's a lot of volunteers just waiting for these roles to come back so that they can, you know, we've kind of said, we've told them about a few online roles, and straight away they know already they're not interested, you know, they want the face-to-face. So if possible, meet outdoors for a coffee date or something like that, or a walk, or whatever you can organise. So the current challenges around volunteering. So volunteers returning in potential, the kinds of fears and challenges they might have would be, of course, COVID related, wanting to limit their contacts, hygiene, etc. As I mentioned, the loss of the social aspect, which is the main reason a lot of volunteers start volunteering, and the not wanting the big commitment now that we can travel and that we've been released back into the wild. We don't want to just, you know, get back into something that, you know, we're not ready for yet. And then your own fears, we're guessing, you know, of yourselves, is about how to best serve your community now again, and service users, you know, having those strict hygiene protocols in place, bringing your volunteers together because you still want them to be part of a team and make them feel like, you know, they're still part of something, and being responsible. You've definitely had, you know, the responsibility level has risen. And then you also have to deal with volunteers not coming back, and that's tough, but that's what we're here for, so we can help you find new volunteers. So just take a breath there now, and we're going to go into breakout rooms if that's okay. Is it? I hope everyone is comfortable with that. Don't worry about it. It's literally where you're just going to go into a room. If you haven't been in it before, we will assign you to a little room, and these
Okay, everybody, I seem to have jumped the gun and put you all in the one room. Okay, so let's close all rooms and try that again. Apologies. Okay.
I'm back.
You're back. Sorry, Olivia.
That's okay. Sure, look, I just want to put up the questions before you go.
I'm going to...
Okay, so these are the questions whenever you get a moment, if you want to just jot them down. Where's your organisation at in terms of reopening and in terms of involving volunteers?
So let's keep going. Okay, so basically, what's the solution to all these issues that everybody is having? And I guess, you know, we don't have all the answers. Over the last year, we haven't had all the answers by any means, but I figure we've started to a new way of working, really, in that we're just trying to support people as best we can to come to their own answers, because we don't always have all the answers. However, we do have some of them. And I think no matter what problems you're coming up with in your volunteer program, it comes back to good planning, good communication, and good volunteer management. And that's what I'm going to run through now. And some of it hopefully will apply to your own situation and you'll be able to make it applicable. So good volunteer management is basically this circle here. You start there at the top with the prepare, then you're moving down to recruit. Then when you've recruited people, you have to train them, and then you're supporting them on an ongoing basis to retain them, basically, to keep them. You know, so we run a longer training. Pre-COVID, we run a training that takes a few hours to do, and it's called Finding and Keeping Volunteers, which basically is like everything we know about how to find them and how to keep them. And then in the middle of it all, you have risk management, which is basically that you're managing the risk as you go along, all the various risks. So I'm going to this is going to be kind of brief because there's only half an hour, and we decided when we're doing Zoom training, we need to keep it fairly short because we know ourselves, people zone out after a while. So the first thing really is to prepare. So big obvious question, why do you need volunteers? Somebody mentioned there in the feedback that, like, you need to sit back and think, well, why do we need volunteers? A few of you mentioned it, actually. And it is the very first thing to think of. There's no point taking on volunteers for the sake of it. Obviously, you need them to do things. It won't work if you're taking them on and you've nothing to give them to do. So what exactly do you want them to do? And you do need to be specific about that. I've seen people before put up ads, and when you talk to them about the ad, they put it up with us and they say, well, I want them to do roughly, you know, some admin for me. And I'll say, well, what exact admin? Well, I'm not exactly sure yet. I'll see who I get. But it doesn't really work that way. You need to say what you're looking for. And if they need to be able to use Word or Excel, or they need to be good on social media, or they need to be expert in running Zooms, whatever it is, you need to be very explicit about that. So you do need to make those decisions in advance. Who is your ideal volunteer? If you know who your ideal volunteer is, you can go after them, basically. So, you know, if your ideal person is a retired person, then you're not, if you putting ads up, you know, putting effort onto your Instagram, it's probably, you know, it's not that age cohort that are on Instagram. They're on Facebook online, and they're on the, you know, the church notices and the local shop notices and all that kind of thing. It's a different audience, and it is really good to have thought out who your ideal volunteer is, because if you know who you're looking for, you're more likely to get them. Do you need insurance? So I would say, like, depending, most organizations already have insurance. If you don't, I'm sure all of you here, yeah, I'm just looking down at who's here, you probably do all have insurance, but it is worth looking at if you're involving volunteers for the first time, or you're involving them in doing something new. It's worth contacting your insurance company to see, is this thing covered that you're doing, you know, or that you're asking the volunteers to do. Don't assume. Sorry, what COVID protocols do you need in place? So I don't want to go on about this because obviously we're a year into this, but you do need to think about what COVID protocols you need in place and how you're going to monitor that. And how you can keep everyone reassured and happy, your communications plan. Now, your communications plan might be just that everybody, you know, all your volunteers are in a WhatsApp group, or it might be that you've decided, like Michelle, like you mightn't have called it a communications plan, but you did have a communications plan over the last few months. you were saying that you had to contact individual volunteers by phone, but it's what you did to keep everybody reassured and happy, and that's exactly it. I mean, there's some organizations that we would have talked to who haven't kept in touch with their volunteers because they found it too difficult, and like I'd be worried now that they won't get as many volunteers back. So you do need to have thought about how you're going to do that and the time that's going to take. When considering volunteer roles, so you need to ask yourself these few things. What would we like to do more of if we had more skills or time available to us? So what are you already doing? You know, your organization is already doing stuff, and maybe you'd like to do more of it, only you don't have enough people, or you're lacking in certain skills, or something is so difficult for you to do because your skills are poor in that certain thing that you don't do much of it. So like social media is a good example there. You could have a very basic Facebook presence, and that's all you have online. And you could obviously do more there if you had more skills, and you could get volunteers in to help with that, either to do it for you or to train you and support you to do it better. What needs are we not meeting? So is there some of your service users who have needs that you're literally not meeting yet at all? You're aware of them, but you as an organization aren't really doing anything about them. And could new skills or new volunteers help with that? What would help your staff or your volunteers in their work? So I know for some of you here, you've staff, other groups here are completely volunteer led. But either way, what would help you in what you're already doing? So again, that could be administrative stuff. It could be that you're struggling with the finance end of things, and maybe like you should get somebody in who's got a accounting experience. Yeah, what are people struggling to do currently? Their current people, what are they struggling to keep on top of? And who needs to be involved at this planning stage? And this one's really important actually, because we sometimes meet people, like especially when we used to have face-to-face meetings with organizations, they'd come in, one person would come in, and I've done an entire meeting with an organization, and I've said to them before they've come in, are you the right person now to do this? Will you be dealing with the volunteers? And they say, yeah, I'm the manager. And then I do this meeting with them and I go through everything. And at the end of it, they say, now I'll tell all this to Mary, because Mary will actually be the one who's doing it. Or similarly, what has happened, I suppose, in the past sometimes is that, you know, management will decide they're going to bring in volunteers into, you know, a workplace. But actually they haven't got the staff on board. And then the staff feel threatened by the volunteers, and it's not a good, you know, people aren't on good relationship then, basically, because sometimes it has happened that staff then resent the volunteers or worry that the volunteers are going to come and do their jobs, basically. So it's really important that you ask yourself who needs to be involved. And maybe it's your full committee, maybe it's a certain management team, but you do need to have the right people involved at the planning stage. Otherwise, when it goes wrong, it'll be because you didn't involve all the key players from the start in the discussion. So I would say, yeah, that's one that's pretty important. So you get into recruiting. Okay, so do you need new or existing volunteers? So the only thing I wanted to say here is, because of COVID, some of our services haven't been running for the last year, or, you know, they haven't even gone online, or they've only gone online in a skeleton way, and they've only involved the staff or one or two core volunteers. But do go back to your old volunteers, even if it has been a year since you spoke to them. Assume nothing. Don't assume people that you'll be annoying them or putting pressure on them. I mean, if you hound them and contact them repeatedly, then you are putting pressure on them. But you want to give them the chance, because they could be waiting for your call. And we in the Volunteer Centre frequently deal with these kind of miscommunications, where people will say, well, I applied for such a thing and I was in touch with them, and then they never contacted me again. But the organisation's story will be, well, we were in touch with them once and then she never answered the phone after that. And it's a communication problem. You know, something has fallen, emails have gone into spam, voicemails haven't been listened to. But it does happen, and it's a pity, because it can cause upset on all sides. And people who want to volunteer can often take things quite personally, actually. You know, they can take it personally, like a rejection, that if you haven't got back to them. So I would say, as well as looking at new volunteers, go back to existing people who've expressed interest with you in the past. Maybe you didn't have anything for them to do at the time, but those people are interested in your organisation, so give them a chance. Have a start and end time. This one was specifically, I suppose, it's to keep things tighter for people, I suppose, particularly if they're virtual roles. And an example of this was, you know, if people are doing admin for you, or something like the friendly call service, for example, where you have a few older people as a volunteer, you've signed up to ring a few older people once a week. if the volunteers don't have a kind of a shift time to do it, even if they're doing it from home, they're more likely to sort of do way more than they should, and then become sort of burnt out and fed up of the commitment that they're giving, or they lose momentum because they're, you know, there's no break between their work life and their home life, their volunteering life and their normal life, and there's no boundaries. So usually the large organizations will have their boundaries quite strong. You know, you talk to an organization like the Samaritans or any of those, they'll have a start and end time and shifts, and that's the reason why it does help with retention of volunteers. Be very specific about tasks. So use plain English. I can't say this one enough. You know, plain English. You're speaking to the general public. You're not speaking to a funder. You know, you're not writing when you write up a role description, you're not writing up a role description to be read by somebody in the department. It's to be read by Joe Soap. It's to be read by your neighbor, your mother, your friend. It's a normal person reading this, and they want to read plain English. They want to like see what, you know, that ad used to be, says what it does on the tin. That's what they want. So be specific, and be specific about the commitment, and be prompt. And actually one thing, it just struck me there while one of the speakers was talking about in the charity shop. I was speaking to somebody who was thinking of volunteering recently, and she said she's a teacher, and she said she'd be very happy to volunteer over the summer when she's around, but because she's a teacher and she hasn't been allowed to travel, she wants to be able to go on her holidays, you know, regularly. So something that is, she wants to be able to drop, you know, go with the drop of a hat basically now that she can. However, she still wants to volunteer because she's got a long summer with no work, you know, with her normal commitment of work isn't there. And I was just thinking, if organizations can be more flexible, they would get more volunteers, as long as you can, as long as this is realistic for you. But maybe instead of saying you must do 1 shift a week, you could say, right, if you can do 2 shifts every fortnight, you know, that can be 1 a week, or it can be 2 in the fortnight. Do you know what I mean? Because that allows people to go away for the week. Because I will say, people do make assumptions, and if you put up that you have to be there once a week, now maybe you know well that you're not going to stress out if they're, you know, if they let you know that they're going on holidays for the first 2 weeks of August, that's okay. I think you need to be explicit in the ad and say that, you know, we do ask for a weekly commitment. However, if you've holidays booked or whatever, we plan this in advance. So it's not, it doesn't preclude them, because people would preclude themselves all the time based on what's written in the ad. I've seen that before. I've seen organizations put up something that they ideally want the volunteers to do it in the morning because it suits them best, but they would actually take them in the afternoon. But they don't say that, they say morning only. And then the volunteers rule themselves out. They say, well, I can't do the morning, so they don't even offer for the afternoon. So you do have to be specific where you can, and be vague if you have the room for vagueness. Now, it does depend on your role. And be prompt. Be prompt is just about striking when the iron is hot, basically. When people are interested, that's the time to ring them. If you have a roll up with us, you will get an email telling you when somebody's interested, and they're interested at that moment. So the sooner you ring them about that, the better, or send them an application form or whatever. So make it attractive to them, and make the application process appropriate. So that's the other thing. You do sometimes see organizations putting very long-winded application processes in place, where they're looking for application forms, they're looking for CVs, they're looking for reference checks, and really the person isn't doing something with great responsibility, you know, and the person might think, God, you know, I'm not applying to be the CEO here, I'm just applying to volunteer a few hours a week. Now, when I say make it appropriate, I spoke to somebody this morning who's applying for Big Brother Big Sister with Feroiga, and they have to have a house visit, and it's a woman who's doing it, and her husband is going to be interviewed as well as her, but that's appropriate for that role of Big Brother Big Sister with Feroiga. So it is about making it appropriate. Okay, so training. So induction is important, and introductions is really important, and it isn't always done, but we touched on this earlier. An awful lot of people volunteer for the social aspect, so the introductions on an ongoing basis until everybody knows each other is really, really important. You need to go through your policies and procedures at that stage, particularly anything that's relevant to them, and don't overboard them with policies and procedures that aren't relevant to what they're going to be doing, because you just make them run a mile. It's all about being relevant and specific to that volunteer. So there isn't really one size fits all. Your IT and communication system, whatever you need to tell them about there. Online tools for online training. Again, we weren't sure how much of this to include because we're not sure how much people are doing of this going forward. I suppose there's always going to be an element of online from now on, I think, as well as the real life stuff. But here's just some things if you might want to note down. There's Teams and Zooms, obviously. Playmeo.com is a good website for getting games from. There's a Kahoot app for quizzes. We used that one time on one of our volunteer manager get-togethers. Actually, one of the youth workers came on and literally while we were on the call, we all downloaded the app and he ran a quiz to show us all how to do it. Digital whiteboards. There's one called Mural that Olivia and I have been using on that course that we're doing. Doodle Polls, which is for scheduling stuff. Google Forms for surveys. And a lot of you probably know about this, but at work we use Google Drive for shared documents, and that can be handy for feedback from your volunteers, like feedback surveys, maybe scheduling, that kind of thing. Have a support procedure for any difficulties completing training online. So ideally you'd have, if you are going to be doing training online, you'd have a phone number of somebody who is, who can, if somebody's having trouble getting onto the call in the first place, that they can ring an old-fashioned phone number. And the support buddy idea is where you basically get an existing volunteer to support a new volunteer coming in. A little bit like what they do, in schools where they have somebody from 6th class buddy up with somebody in junior infants. You get an experienced volunteer to buddy up with somebody who is who you think would be, your experienced volunteers. So who do you think? Some of them would be very happy to do this role. Obviously, they have to be willing, but if they're willing, a lot of them will be happy to be a support buddy, which means that they could help them with not just training, with the bedding in process in general, and help them get that sense of ownership and that sense of belonging that they're probably looking for. If an organization, if a volunteer doesn't get a sense of belonging fairly quickly in your organization, they won't stick around. A sense that they matter and that they have a job to do and that they're important and that they're part of the team. That's all really important to keep them around. Okay, so support. So ways to feel connected and ensure your volunteers feel supported. So I said already, like you could create an online group, a Facebook group or a WhatsApp. Now you do need to make sure that everybody consents to that and everybody is happy with that. So you would have to flag that with everybody first. But there can be great ways for people to form that those relationships, and it can take the pressure off you a little bit as the person in charge of them, because people will have they'll form their own little relationships as well, and so the more of that kind of thing you can do, the better. So Zoom might be off-putting for some people, but maybe they're avid Facebook users and would be happy to join a private Facebook group just made up of you and your volunteers, or maybe they'd be happy to join WhatsApp. And WhatsApp, really, you may have to sit with them initially to show them how to download WhatsApp and get it going. But once you do, there wouldn't be, it's not that tricky after that, as I'm sure you all know. So it's about kind of being creative about how you do things. Communication is vital. So conference video calls are, well, we're just saying this now because you're allowed to do this, but you are allowed to meet up outdoors now. So I would say for any teams who aren't having regular team meetups, somebody mentioned that the coffee room is going to be gone now. The coffee break, is all going to have to be staggered and people aren't going to be in the room at the same time. Or for people who are still operating online, maybe you could set it that like the first Wednesday of every month, or I don't know, rotate the days. But basically, you could do a doodle poll to find out when people will do it, or if doodle polls are too technically advanced for some people, literally just ask people when's a good time. And you might have 10 volunteers. If there's only 3 of them coming to those outdoor meetups, those 3 are getting something out of it. And if you're going along as well and you can shout them a coffee, all the better, if you can afford to do that. If you have a budget, and you should argue for a budget for that kind of thing. Check-in calls, texts or voice messages pre or post shifts. So again, I suppose these are tips to kind of replace the old informal chat that you'd have with people going in and out the door, or over the tea break or whatever. So maybe now, if you have a new volunteer, especially in the beginning, until they're happy, do a little check-in call with them afterwards. If you're too busy to call them, text them or send a voice message. I don't know if other people are using voice messages now on WhatsApp, but they're very easy to use, and it's very personal, and you can do it very quickly. Literally, you can just hold down the button and say, "Hi, it's Riona here. You did your first shift today, or I just wanted to check in with you and see how you found it. Send me one of these back or text me back." But it shows that you care, and it's quicker than having to phone them every time. So it's easier for you if you've got a number of volunteers. And I mentioned the buddy system there as well. So possibly you might have this option to match up new and old volunteers, and they can be doing that with each other. And you can give a little bit of thought as to who would go well together, Or the other thing is encourage volunteers to bring a friend along, because again, you would be amazed what people assume. I've talked to people before who've said, I volunteer in the charity shop. I think my friend could start, and I'm like, yeah, have you said this to the manager? And they're like, no, I wasn't sure what, is that frowned upon? Like one person said that to me once, and I was like, no, ask the manager. People make all sorts of assumptions. It's amazing. Okay, birthday or Christmas cards. So birthday and Christmas cards are a real easy touch if you can do it either in the post if you have a small number of volunteers, or if not, even an email. But you need to be genuine and personalise it. You don't want to get like the text that you get from the hairdresser. I get one from a hotel I stayed in Austria a few years ago. I actually like getting it even though it's not personal. I still like getting it. It reminds me of my holiday there. So, but if you can like spend, a minute or two to write something genuine on that card, that'll keep them engaged as well and make them feel important. Okay, so, and I know I'm flying through these things here, but risk management, I suppose, identifying and managing risks, so that there's lots of risks along in your organizations. I know for the ones of you bigger organizations, this isn't really your thing, I suppose. So I'm speaking specifically about your volunteer program here. So you need to think about the COVID risk wise, obviously, and technology wise, if there's risks and what are those. And that's why you do need to get permissions from everybody and to keep an eye, moderate. If you are going to set up something like a Facebook group, you do need to be active on there yourself and just moderate it and deal with it, nip any problems in the bud, and maybe have group rules and that kind of thing. But overall, what we always say to people is, if you get the recruitment right, you won't have problems down the road because you've got a good, solid recruitment process. And a lot of people are too, the way we were back in the 80s or the 90s about some roles, if the roles aren't, obviously if the roles involve vulnerable people, then people are fairly tight on that, but people aren't always tight on the looser roles, the rules that don't involve vulnerable people. But it is good to have it really well thought out and a good process in place, because you will prevent problems down the line. And it's actually quite stressful to try and fire a volunteer or retire a volunteer. So the best thing to do is not get anybody who might be difficult in the first place. Now, I'm only saying it, obviously it doesn't happen very often, but I'm saying it because it does happen. So the first thing is the well thought out role description. And this is the bit that we can help you with a little bit. If you're struggling, you put in your role description to us, then we can contact you, and we will contact you if it doesn't make sense to us. And we'll say, look, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Be explicit, about what exactly you want them to do. And the more thought out the role description is, the process of thinking out the role description helps you to clarify what you're looking for. Have a clear and concise application form if you're using one, or a well-structured initial call. So what I usually say to people is, before you send them, unless you're dealing with hundreds of volunteers, and this is not possible, for most of you, you're dealing with small numbers of volunteers. When you get that email from us, or you get the first interest from a volunteer, whoever it comes, obviously they don't all come through us. If you can pick up the phone to them and have a couple of key questions you can ask them in that phone call, in a nice friendly phone call, and they will want to ask you as well about your volunteer role, you'll be more likely to screen them out at that stage. So if, for example, you've advertised for somebody to help with your social media, and they ring and they go, well, I have my own social media, and you say to them, well, have you ever done any professional social media of any type for any page, have you ever ran a page? And they say, oh, no, but I thought it'd be good to try it. Then they're probably no use to you, because you want somebody who's got a bit of experience. So you can screen them out at that point, and you're not wasting time with application forms or anything else. You're being fair because you had it in your role description in the first place that you needed that experience. So that's what I usually recommend, is to do a well-structured initial call where you've thought it out, but it's fairly short and sweet. And you're sort of, screening people out from that time on. Then you get on to interviews, and here you're assessing the skills and commitment that you've laid out in the role description, so it is fair and consistent to everybody. Reference checks if you're doing them. Again, this should be done in a consistent way. Garda vetting, and that involves an ID confirmation. If you require Garda vetting, Olivia's our Garda vetting person. If you're unsure whether you require Garda vetting or not, you can ask us, but it's generally only for roles that involve under 18s or vulnerable adults. Most of you are probably clear enough on that. We do have a service on that though, if you need it. Orientation and training, including confidentiality and COVID protocols. When we have volunteers in the volunteer centre, we get them to sign a confidentiality thing. When people sign something, they take it seriously. So if that's something for you, and I'd imagine for most people it is an issue, get them to sign a little confidentiality agreement. We can give you a template if you don't have one. And also I would get them to sign the COVID thing. So whatever protocols you're putting in place, have them down on a page as part of your volunteer agreement. A volunteer agreement is a template we can give you as well, or it's up on our website, and it's basically like a little sort of informal, like a little job contract. What it does is it helps people take it seriously. You mightn't spring it on them like straight away, but you would tell them about it at the induction, and you might say, right, you know, like, we're going to sign this the next day if you're happy to do that. And it makes them take it a bit more seriously. So then supervision and support, including volunteer appreciation. And I won't talk anymore about volunteer appreciation because I said that already. You know, that's where you're, you know, texting them the odd time and you're sending them a card the odd time or whatever. And be genuine about this. Don't thank them for nothing. I've been a volunteer in things where I got thanked endlessly and I never did anything because they never asked me to do anything meaningful at all. And it kind of just annoyed me that they kept thanking me for not doing very much. Okay, and an exit interview, even if it's just saying, like, before somebody's leaving, listen, can we have a quick cup of coffee or a phone call? Have you got any tips for me to, you know, to improve how our volunteer program works? It can be as simple as that, but they might have valuable stuff to tell you that's useful, so it's worth asking. Okay, everybody with me? Yeah. Okay, keep going. So I'm going to ask you to, let me see, how am I doing for time? Actually, oh my God, it's past. I'm going to have to skip this slide. It's short anyway, because I was going to ask your feedback on it. We're almost at the end, guys. But I was going to ask what skills you need to cultivate and cope with change. But I say one of the things that we have learned is to let go of perfectionism. And you'll have seen that in evidence tonight, because Olivia and I have been trying things that didn't work. And that's the approach that we've had to take over this last year, because we're not Zoom experts. We're not, you know, super techie people. We're just doing our best to continue our services in whatever way we can. And we find most people are very forgiving, and it makes people relax if you're relaxed. So being creative and being brave and saying, I'll go for it. Sure, I haven't tried to set up these breakout rooms before, but how hard can it be? We'll manage. And we did manage, and it was fine. Olivia usually does the breakout rooms. Okay, we're almost at the end. So I'll keep on going. Learning outcomes from our networking events. So these are things that came out of our VMGTs, we call them the volunteer coordinators get-togethers. Keep in touch with their existing volunteers, reach out to colleagues and other volunteer managers. Our networking events, they are actually really good. People do usually get something out of them. And don't be afraid to just reach out to your colleagues and other people who are doing the same job as you, even in other organizations. People are generally helpful. When recruiting new volunteers, be really clear about the COVID implications. Think it through and be explicit. Be explicit about lots of things. Be brave and creative. This is my last point. Be open to new approaches and let go of trying to be perfect, because it doesn't work anyway. None of us are perfect. And, you know, you're not running a massive corporation or anything. We're all involved in small groups and we're all just doing our best. Go easy on yourself. Fundraising and skilled volunteers. So sometimes people would say, well, you know, no point putting up an ad for a fundraising volunteer because nobody wants to fundraise. There's no point putting up an ad for this really skilled thing that's probably very skilled that nobody can do. But in our experience, if you don't put it up, you won't get it. So if you put it up anyway, put it up and try and get them. You'd be amazed. There's all sorts of people with all sorts of skills coming to us looking to volunteer. Avail of any free online training, get-togethers, etc. And I have a list of them right here. So on our website, over the last year, we did a tips and tricks series where we had our board members, actually, each like 4 or 5 of our board members offered their own expertise, and they're all up on our website. You can watch them back on YouTube. Some of them are very good practical things around governance, social media, measuring impact and outcomes, marketing, and there was one on sustainability and energy for community groups as well. Social Media Academy, that's Sligo PPN, have a load of videos up there on how to do basics of social media for community groups. Volunteer.ie have lots of resources, including volunteer policies, etc. Sligo Leader have this free training coming up in the next 2 weeks, actually. If you want to note that Rethinking Community Communication is the name of it. It's actually hard enough to find it on their website, but it's 2 free trainings in the next few weeks about reopening. So I just thought they might be useful to you. The Wheel as well, some of their training is paid, but they do have a storytelling series, and that is coming up in June. And they had it last year and I went to it and it was really good. So I would recommend doing that. It's free, it's in June. And the Carmichael Centre has one free. A lot of theirs are paid as well. So I wanted to tell you about the free one. There's one about legacy funding. So basically trying to tap into to getting in people's wills, basically. It's an area you don't see much about in the community sector, so I wanted to tell you about it. And the last things are that on this Thursday, it's National Volunteer Week, so on this Thursday we do have a volunteer information session. If any of you know anybody who's interested in volunteering, and Olivia and I will be doing that. And we have a coffee promo. So any of your volunteers can pop into any of the 8 coffee shops on that flyer there. And you'll see this all over our social media, and they'll get a free coffee if they go in and tell them they volunteer. So if you want to send that out to your volunteers, tell them to go in to those coffee shops in Sligo. This is in Sligo, and Tubbercurry and Eastleigh. Right, I'm finally at the end. Okay, and I did go over a little bit. Have I lost anybody? We haven't really, I don't think, have we? Maybe we have. Olivia, unmute there and join me.
Yeah, no, that's great.